With the delayed start to the season for Ron Acuna Jr., the suspension of Jurickson Profar, and the regression of Michael Harris, the Atlanta Braves outfield has been a mess this season. But with the return of Profar, Acuna back, what should this outfield group look like going forward? I'll answer that question and many more on today's mailbag episode of Locked On Braves. So let's get into it.
You are Locked On Braves, your daily Atlanta Braves podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hey, welcome back to Locked On Braves, part of Locked On Sports Atlanta, where we cover your favorite Atlanta sports teams each and every day. I'm your host, Jake Mastriani. You can follow me on social media at Shortstop Ball. Check out the podcast there at LockedOn_Braves on X and Locked On Braves on Instagram. If you're new and watching this on YouTube, please do me a huge favor. Hit that subscribe button. We're really close, like 7 away from 14,000 subscribers on YouTube. So thank you so much for all your support there. Hit the thumbs up button so others can find us. Leave me a comment down below. I appreciate it a ton whenever you do those things. And if you're listening on the audio version, which is still the majority of our listeners, make sure you leave us a 5-star review on Apple, Spotify, or wherever you get your podcast. Thank you so much for making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. And big shout out to all my everydayers out there who comment every day, hit the thumbs up button, join me in the live sessions that we do. Thank you so much for all your support here at Locked On Braves. It's a Mailbag Friday. We made it to the end of another work week and got a lot of questions coming your way, about 20 questions on today's episode 26. Wow, we got a lot of late entries here, so we'll see if we get to all of them. Many of them have to do with Jurickson Profar, his return, coming up pretty soon. We're still several weeks away, but a lot of questions about Profar and his return. What does the outfield situation look like? Obviously, some trade questions and some questions beyond this season as well, if the Braves continue to regress as they have so far this season. So a lot to get to. And today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Right now, new customers can get $200 in bonus bets when your first $5 bet wins. So let's jump right into the questions here. A couple from Joey Milby, everydayer here at Locked On Braves, said draft preview. If Ike Irish, Gavin Keelan, and Daniel Pierce are all available, who would you take? So I know Joey's an everydayer anyway, but if I didn't know that, this question would make it obvious because those are my 3 top choices for the Atlanta Braves. If they are available, there's a good chance all 3 of them are gone by the time the Braves pick at 22. But the way I would rank that group is Gavin Keelan. I just think he's the best pure hitter of that group. Ike Irish, I think he's maybe the best all-around hitter, giving you some power, some average, and all that. I just don't know where you play Ike Irish. And then lastly, I'd go with Daniel Pierce, who might have the most upside of all of them, but it's just a high school hitter. You never really know how they're going to develop. And as a Georgia kid, which I like because if they do develop, then you got, instant marketing material there. So I love all 3 of these guys, and I hope one of them is available at 22. But I'd rank them Keelan, Irish, and Daniel Pierce. Another one from Joey who says, Hayden Harris, I know it's tough to be a one-trick pony and get MLB hitters out, especially if that one trick is a low 90s fastball, but does he ever get a real shot? Watching him make these AA hitters look foolish makes me wonder. So I've wondered that myself too. The only real extensive, and not even extensive, but the only look I saw with Hayden Harris against major league hitters has been in spring training a couple of years ago, and it didn't go well. And it is just kind of wild to see the numbers that he's put up at the minor league level with a low 90s fastball. But, it has good profile, good shape to it, and it's able to get some swings and misses. I mean, you can't deny the numbers at a certain point, especially with the Braves bullpen. I feel like you got to give him a chance and see if there is something there against major league hitters. But I think the reason he hasn't been promoted as aggressively, despite having insane numbers in the minor league level, is just because it's hard to really believe that what he's dishing out is that good, but it has been. And at some point, I think you just got to see what it can be. And then another one from Joey who says, what are you watching for at the College World Series as the College World Series starts? Who do you think is going to win? And why is it Louisville? They are the only team I watch really. So who else should I pay attention to? So yes, the College World Series underway right now. I was watching it before we jumped on here. Coastal Carolina up on Arizona. You got Murray State in this one at 4 seed from a regional making it. So it's a pretty diverse College World Series to say the least. Not a lot of names that I think many thought would be here. Only 2 SEC teams. As far as what I'll be watching to see, some of the names that I think the Braves might target, specifically some of those Arkansas pitchers, Gage Wood, Zach Root, who I think could be at the back end of the draft that maybe the Braves could go after, maybe even with their second pick. Anthony Iacin for LSU. I know those are all SEC arms that I've seen plenty, but seeing what they can do on the big stage. But I also want to see all the other teams. Like I said, I mainly only follow the SEC. That's who I write for over at College Baseball Central. So I'm really curious to see some of the other teams, especially the kid from Arizona. And his name is eluding me right now, and it's not exactly an easy name to say, but the shortstop, sorry, not for Arizona, for UCLA, who could be the number one pick next year. And look, if the Braves continue to go in this direction that they are this season, they get a top 10 pick next year, maybe it's a shot to get the shortstop from UCLA or Justin LeBron from Alabama and get a big time shortstop next year. I don't think that's going to happen. In fact, thinking pessimistically, the Braves probably win just enough games so that they don't make the postseason, but they also get a high teens pick next season as well. But that's kind of what I'm looking for. I want to see some of those pitchers that the Braves might be targeting at the back half of the first round or with their second pick even, and looking at some of the other players from around the country, some of the teams around the country that I just don't get to watch all that often. As far as who I think is going to win, this has got to be the year that Arkansas gets it done. I've thought that they're the most complete team, at least in the SEC, all year long. They got the depth of hitting, depth of pitching to get it done. Unfortunately for them, they might be facing the best pitcher in the College World Series in Game 1 in Cade Anderson from LSU. So they're going to be off to a really rough start if they can't figure out Cade Anderson in Game 1. Obviously, they got some really good pitchers to throw up against him, but they very well could have to dig their way out of the loser's bracket to get into the College World Series final. They might have beat Cade Anderson twice in order to get to the College World Series final. So that's a tough draw for Arkansas. Next question comes from Dustin Mounts, who says, what roster moves do you see happening based on the current roster when Fairchild comes back from rehab assignment, then when Profar returns? So here's what I'll say about Stuart Fairchild. I don't know that he's guaranteed to come back to the roster. It would be a Zokar that would go. It would when Fairchild comes back. I think that's the obvious answer there, is that it would have to be a Zokar that they get rid of for Fairchild. But I don't know that it's just a given that Fairchild's going to get his roster spot back. Look, they haven't used a Zokar for much of anything other than pinch running, and they really didn't use Fairchild. Fairchild got a couple of starts against lefties here or there, but with Profar maybe returning at the same time, I don't think it's necessary. So I don't think it's a given that Fairchild's just going to come back to the roster. If he does, then it'll probably be a Zokar. The other player that's likely on the chopping block, I think, is Luke Williams. Only problem with that is he's your only backup shortstop at the moment, unless Eli White, you feel okay putting him at shortstop, but Luke Williams, your only backup shortstop. But outside of those two, I don't really know who else you get rid of. I don't think you're getting rid of Eli White. Alex Verdugo, you could get rid of him, but then that takes away a left-handed bat. So I think those would be the ones. Zokar definitely could be the one to get cut loose with either one of those guys coming back. Luke Williams, Alex Verdugo. Again, I don't think you get rid of Eli White. Even if he's not an everydayer for you, just having that speed off the bench, I think gives Eli White a good shot of staying on the roster. Prairie Companion says, do you think AA brought in players to match Snit's preferred style of management? My question to you would be, what is Snit's preferred style of management? I honestly don't know. Obviously been watching this Braves team for a long time, ever since he took over and well before that. What is his preferred style of management? I guess you could say it's a more laid back approach. And I think the Braves have definitely brought in a bunch of guys who have that workman's like mentality, that they come to work, they show up, they do their job, and they kind of leave their job at their job. And that kind of feels like Snit's mentality of a manager. So I guess in that sense, maybe they brought in players to match that style. But to answer the question simply, though, I don't think AA has brought in players specifically to match that. I think he's brought in players to match what the team, the organization's philosophy has been. And offensively, for a while, that has been to bring in players that hit home runs. I think that needs to change as the game has changed, but I don't think it's been anything necessarily to try to fit whatever Brian Snitker does. Sorry, I made that sound like a shot at Brian Snitker. I didn't mean to. I'm curious what you think his style of management is, because I honestly don't know. Brandon Bushnell says, is the closer for the 2026 or beyond season in the Braves system now, or do you think they have to look outside to fill the role? I think they have to look outside. It may be on this team at some point this year, but right now, I don't think the Braves have their closer for 2026 and beyond. I think at the deadline, if you could trade for somebody that could be your closer maybe this year, if Iggy never figures it out, or Dylan Lee or Pierce Johnson don't fill that role, I think it'd be very wise to go and get an arm that could fill that role this year and possibly going forward. I will say this: if Dayswell were to get the command issues under control and be the big strikeout pitcher that he has been in the past, I think he's still the best candidate. But yeah, he just hasn't proven that enough yet so far this season. Nicholas Simonik says, with all the bullpen struggles, could you see guys like Waldrop, Harris, Lara, or Munoz help this year? Yeah, absolutely. Although I watched Giancarlo Lara the other day, really hoping that his previous outing, so 2 outings ago, was a step in the right direction. It was not. Now, granted, he came into a bases loaded, no out situation, but he had no idea where any of his pitches were going. And you can't have that at the big league level, even as good as the stuff may be. He was constantly pumping 101, 102, but he had no idea where it was going. And that's just not going to cut it at the big league level. So I don't think Lara's all that close. But yeah, Waldrop, if they were to convert him to the bullpen, Hayden Harris, we already talked about him. Munoz, I've always liked, but he has some similar command issues, not necessarily to the degree of Lara or even Daysville. But I think the Braves have several arms in the system that could be big reliever type arms at some point. It's just for this year, how confident are you moving those guys up and trusting them in clutch situations? If the Braves were to just completely be out of it, then I think you bring all those guys up and give them all a debut at the end of the season. But I don't know that they're guys this year that you're going to bring up and count on to really turn this bullpen around. But going forward, I think there are a lot of arms in the system that could help out in the bullpen. All right, a lot more questions to get to on today's episode of Locked On Braves. We'll answer some more of those here next. Whether you're gearing up for a back-to-back meeting, shuttling kids back and forth to activities, or tackling an endless to-do list, your morning sets the tone for it all. That's why it should start with a perfect cup of coffee crafted just for you. Enter Trade. Trade is the #1 coffee destination in the U.S., delivering fresh, incredible coffee from over 50 of the country's top roasters. Whether you're a cold brew fan or a pour-over purist, they've got a roast you'll love. And if the first match isn't perfect, Trade will replace it for free until they get it just right. I love their prices. They're comparable to grocery brands, but the flavor is on a whole other level. Right now, Trade is exclusively offering our customers 50% off your 1-month trial at drinktrade.com/lockedonmlb. That's TRADE.com/lockedonmlb for 50% off your 1-month trial. So again, go to drinktrade.com/lockedonmlb and get 50% off a 1-month trial for Trade coffee. Thank you, as always, making Locked On Braves your first listen of each and every day. Go check out the guys over at Locked On MLB for your second listen, as well as Locked On Sports Atlanta, where they cover some other of your favorite Atlanta sports teams. It's not just the Braves in Atlanta. You got the Hawks, Falcons, maybe another hockey team coming your way pretty soon, too. So make sure you subscribe to Locked On Sports Atlanta. Let's jump back into the questions, though. We still got a lot more to get to. Julie Craig says, with it being unlikely the Braves make the postseason, is it time to trade some key players to start a rebuild? I fear it. Some tough decisions aren't made. The team will be in the same spot next season. So even if the Braves don't make the postseason this year, which again, it doesn't seem likely. I know I laid out a very optimistic path for them in yesterday's episode. You want to go check that out, but it is unlikely that happens and that the Braves make the postseason this year. And if that is the case, I still don't think there's going to be a major blow up and rebuild. I think it will be definitely some big moves made. I think you see a managerial change. I think you'll see some shakeup in the position player side of things to kind of retool the offense and redirect it in the path that it needs to go. But I don't think you'll see a full rebuild. Another one from Julie says, would you put the recent missteps by the Braves more on AA or the owners? If AA is to be believed, he kind of incriminates himself because he says that he has the money to go out and make moves, that ownership hasn't really put those limits on him. And if that's the case, then I think AA is to blame, because if that's the case, you didn't do enough. You haven't spent enough money and you've been too careful with this core that you have and haven't done enough to add on to it. And look, I know it's not fair to compare to the Dodgers and to the Mets of the world who have, endless amounts of money to spend. But the Dodgers had a great core. They could have not gone out and signed Blake Snell. They could have not gone out and brought back a Teoscar Hernandez. They still would have had a good team even without those guys. But they didn't just sit there after winning a World Series and stay complacent. They continued to buy and add on and build what is a super team. Whereas the Braves have done a great job. They built this core. They won a World Series, and then they've stayed complacent. You penny pinched a franchise player in Freddie Freeman, and I get it. I hate to have to go through this every time I talk about Freddie Freeman. I get it. Extenuating circumstances, blame the agent, blame whoever you want. You can also blame Alex Anthopoulos for not giving a franchise player another year. But my overall point is, even after winning that World Series, even after building this core, you didn't do enough to add on to those foundational pieces to really put this core over the top. Instead, you spent $24 on a reclamation project like Jared Kelenic. And it just feels like ever since winning the World Series, it's been more of just sustaining instead of building. And I think if we look back at this run and the Braves don't win another World Series, that's going to be my biggest complaint, is that instead of trying to build a superpower like we've seen the Dodgers do, and again, can't compare money, spent between the Braves and the Dodgers, but it feels like you try to stay complacent and worry more about consistency and longevity rather than trying to build a powerhouse type of team. And I think that is where I put a lot of fault on AA. But if we can't believe AA, and look, he said a lot of things here lately that you just can't believe, and he actually is getting hampered by ownership to get under the luxury tax, to not spend quite as much, then you put it on the owners. We just don't know that. But again, from everything AA said publicly, he has incriminated himself, and it's him that deserves the blame. But other rumblings that we hear is that there's just not been enough money to spend. Or I shouldn't say not enough. He spent plenty of money, but they haven't been able to go above and beyond to spend the money to really create a powerhouse and sustain a dynasty. Dustin Mounts, if the Braves don't really sell and buy at the deadline, but with more of a focus on improving next year with little help this year, what would that look like for you, and who would be your number one Braves type of player to target? I think we already kind of touched on that. If they're not going to sell and they're going to do kind of a soft buy with this year and next year in mind, obviously you have to get players that are not just rentals, but players that have another year of control. My number one target would be somebody that can be a closer for not just the rest of this year, but for next year as well. I don't know necessarily who that is at the moment, but that would be my number one target, is trying to find somebody at the deadline that can be your closer for this year and maybe even in next year and future years too. Caden Hurd, what is your dream lineup when Profar comes back, and where do you hit each guy? So, big question, loaded question, because we don't know what Profar is going to look like. We've talked a lot about how the Braves don't have somebody that really fits into that 2 hole. If Profar is the player that we thought he could be, a 330, 340 on-base guy with, 15, 20 home run pop, I think he could be an ideal hitter behind Ronald Acuna Jr. and somebody that doesn't strike out a lot as well. I think he could be a solid number 2 hitter. And so you could have a Ronald, Profar, and then either Riley or Olsen, whoever's hitting better at the moment, going in the 3-4 spot, and Ozuna backing them up. And suddenly you got a really solid, top 5 in the order. We just don't know what Profar is going to look like yet. But if Profar is the player we thought we were getting, I think he could be a nice fit in that number 2 hole in the order. If not there, then I think you obviously have to put him towards the bottom of the lineup. It's just the Braves are now filling up the bottom of their lineup with the Nick Allens, with the Michael Harrises, with, whatever catcher at the moment, Sean Murphy, if he's not hitting well right now. And so you got Eli White. It's just, I guess he wouldn't be in the lineup with Profar coming back, but you got too many guys right now that you're trying to fit at the bottom of the order, that it's pushing bottom of the order guys up towards the middle. But if Profar can be that guy, I think he is an ideal number 2 hitter. And then it just lengthens your lineup even more, because then you got an O'Reilly, Olsen, Ozuna coming your way. Matt says, having a slow start has killed us this year. We can't take a nonchalant attitude early in seasons because we don't start hitting until June. AA just assumed it could be challenging without Strider and Ronald, and we make up the difference when they got back. Bad strategy. I do think some of the fault that you give AA in the front office, again, if they were told to try to get under the luxury tax, that's one thing. But it does feel like that there was let's just wait and see what we get when Ronald and Strider return. There did seem to be that feeling coming into the year that they were just going to wait until Ronald and Strider came back and hope that they could hold on until that point. And, to Matt's point, that really killed us, not having enough from the get-go. Of course, they could not foresee the Profar suspension. And that, again, cannot emphasize enough how much that really wrecked this team, this offense, because that was supposed to be the bat that really helped diversify this lineup into not being so prone to home runs. And him getting suspended was the first week of the season. That really wrecked this offense and really wrecked the plans. The only big move that they made all off season. So got to have that caveat there. Kathy G says, Nick Allen's defense is unbelievable. Is there any hope that they can improve his bat? He'll never be a power guy, but if he could maintain a mid to high 200s batting average, I'd take it all day for the defensive run saves. Is that even possible? Thanks. Love the show and appreciate your insight. Well, thank you, Kathy, for the support here on the show. If they don't try, because here's what the Braves' philosophy has been, and maybe this is changing with Tim Hires. I still don't think we've seen the fruits of that labor just yet. You can't turn Nick Allen, obviously, into a slugging star, which is what the Braves' MO has been for so long. Get guys in here who can hit high, average exit velocity, hard hit percentages. That's what the Braves have focused on so much over the course of the last several years. You can't do that with Nick Allen. So do they have the skill set to help elevate a player with his skill set and being more of a Luis Ariz? I'm not saying he can be a Luis Ariz, but being more of a soft contact average type of hitter. Because if you're right, if you could get Nick Allen to hit 250, 260 and play the type of defense that he can play, then that's a big win for the Braves. I'm not confident. You said, is there any hope? There's a small percentage chance of hope. It's hard for me to see this front office when they've been so focused on hitting the ball hard, having big exit velocity numbers. Look what they did with Orlando Arcia, which, worked for a little bit. It's hard for me to see them being able to take a player like Nick Allen, his profile, and turn him into anything better than what he is right now, which seems to be a low 200s type of hitter. But yeah, it would be huge. He could be the shortstop of the future if he could just hit 250, 260 and bat ninth with some speed and play the great defense that he's played. All right, we got several more questions to get to. Hopefully we don't run out of time. I'm going to try my best here. We'll get into the rest of these questions next. The NBA Finals are in full swing. Game 4 happening on Friday night. And every night delivers highlight-worthy performances, major momentum shifts, and can't-miss moments. Whether it's a game-winning shot or a breakout player, there's never been a better time to get in on the action. And FanDuel makes it easy to stay in the game before tip-off and live with player props, performance trends, and same-game parlays. Fans have more ways than ever to play smart and win big. You can look at and track their trends to make a wise investment, or you can combine live prop bets mid-game based on how the action unfolds. And right now, I believe the Pacers are up 2-1, bit of an underdog in that series as Oklahoma City was the heavy favorite going in. But if you moved on to baseball season, maybe you bought into the last podcast and you believe that the Braves have a chance to get to the postseason and win a World Series, you can take advantage of their plummeting odds right now over at FanDuel.com. Also, make sure you visit FanDuel.com/playsafe for tools and resources to help you stay in control of the way you play. If you're new to FanDuel, it's the perfect time to sign up. Head to FanDuel.com and place your first $5 bet. If it wins, you'll get $200 in bonus bets. All right, thank you so much for joining me here today on today's live episode of Locked On Braves. Let's get back into the questions because still got several to get to. JJ says, an overlooked perk of a base stealer is that the hitter gets more fastballs. With Ronald not being a threat, the two hitters, Riley, Baldwin, are getting a lot of off speed. If Profar sticks to his career average in OBP at 331, does he move to the leadoff spot or do they try Baldwin? I think he goes to the 2 spot. I just don't think Ronald's going to come out of that leadoff spot anytime soon. That's where he feels comfortable. That's where he's been so good. I just don't think, as Lindsay kind of pointed to on the postcast the other day, ideal spot for Ronald might be 2 or 3 in the lineup. So you get him more RBI opportunities, but I just don't think he's coming out of the leadoff spot. I do think if he is that bat, like you mentioned, that 330 on base type of hitter, that you could put him in that 2 spot and you at least get somebody that's going to put the ball in play with Ronald on base. But you're right about the first point of this. And I think that's what made 2023 so special for the entire offense. And again, it's not fair to put this much on Ronald, but when you have somebody on base that is a threat to steal every time they get there, the pitcher has to speed up their mechanics. They have to throw more fastballs to give the catcher a better chance of throwing out a runner. It just does so much more for your offense other than him just stealing bases. And without that threat right now, you're right. Hitters behind him, Riley, Baldwin, whoever's there, they're not getting those fastballs because they're not as worried about Ronald running. So again, that's why getting Ronald to run again, at least to some degree, I think just could really make this offense, take off. But again, I understand being cautious with him. La Crocodile says, curious to hear your thoughts on Eli White, Michael Harris platoon, if Jurickson Profar returns with a better offensive profile than the current left field platoon. So I guess the scenario here is Profar comes back. He looks like Profar. He's the everyday left fielder. Do you go with a platoon of Michael Harris and Eli White in center field? I don't think so. Again, Eli White had the great kind of hot stretch that he had. And maybe if he continues playing, maybe he can be a decent, 700 OPS, bottom of the order type of player with good speed. I just think Michael Harris is going to play every day in center field. Another question about that later that we'll get to. So I don't see them doing a platoon of Eli and Michael Harris. Should they give him some off days out there against a tough lefty? Certainly. But I don't think it'll be a straight platoon situation. Big Dog Fan 73 says, who do you see being the next arm from the farm making the jump to the bigs as a starter? Waldrop, Richie, Burkhalter, someone else. So did get pointed out in the comments section by Brugglesby talked about Didier getting promoted to AAA, thinking his AA promotion was aggressive, which it was. So you got to throw him in the mix as well. You'd asked me at the beginning of the season. I still think my answer is the same now. I think it would be Lucas Braun is the next of that group, unless they do transition Burkhalter to a reliever. And I think he could be in the bullpen now. And as a college guy, somebody that pitched in the SEC, I would be more comfortable giving him a shot in the bullpen this year in high leverage situations than any of the other names we mentioned. But if you're just talking about as a starter, which is what the question was, I'd say Lucas Braun is next up. I don't think Waldrop, I think he still has a long way to go working on these new mechanics, getting that under control. But I still think Lucas Braun is probably the next up of the young arms that could make a start. Burkhalter, if we're just talking about in a relief role, and then Didier Fuentes, and then I don't think J.R. Ritchie's too far behind him. Last time when they promoted Didier Fuentes to AA, J.R. Ritchie was like a week or two behind, and he's been throwing the ball well lately. So I wouldn't be surprised if he gets a call up soon either. Another one from Big Dog Fan who says, if the Braves are able to claw their way back into it and Ronaldo returns, could you see him making the move to the pen, especially if the closer position is still in flux? So yes, I've talked about this before too. I think if Ronaldo has any chance of getting back this year, I think it comes back in a bullpen role. And we had the question earlier, do the Braves have the closer in system? I wasn't really thinking about Ronaldo when I answered that question. He is somebody that if he comes back, you're already kind of paying him reliever or closer type of money. If he can come back and you get him in the bullpen role, he is somebody I could see being the Braves closer going forward. Certainly, he has that big stuff. He goes back to a bullpen role and he's throwing more 98, 99. I could see that happening for Ronaldo. But yes, for this year, I think if Ronaldo comes back, I think it probably should be in a bullpen role. Another one from Matt Karch who says, what has happened to our wonderful front office this year? They are doing their best Florida Marlins impression. AA has had to have made the most transactions of any team this year, and most are scrap heap junk. Now they are even giving bad vibes with the Kimbrel debacle. Yes, all the comments from James McCann talking about not liking the way the Braves handled Kimbrel. I don't like the way they handled Kimbrel, even though as a business, it probably was the right move. It's just a bad look. And as I said, when it happened on the podcast, when I discussed this, it's just a front office that can't really take on any more bad looks and bad vibes. And that's kind of what it gave off. And it led to these comments from James McCann that are putting some more bad vibes around the front office right now. It has not been good. And look, I think the motive right now, narrative, whatever, and I don't think either of those words are right for what I'm trying to say here, but I think AA is only going to make a big move to put them over the luxury tax. Sorry, let me say this again. I don't think there's going to be any big moves to take them over the luxury tax unless it is a big move. Again, I don't know that I'm explaining this correctly. So that's why you're seeing all of these small moves, because he doesn't want to do anything to take them into the tax unless it's something tax worthy. And that was kind of the comment from the offseason. They were willing to go into the tax, but it had to be a big signing for a Jeff Hoffman before the medicals, fell apart on that move. It had to be something major. And I just don't think that major move has been there for them to do that yet. So I think that's and now that the Braves are 10 games out of a playoff spot, what real motivation does the team have to go into the tax? So I just think that's kind of where the front office was going into the offseason. They wanted to stay under the tax if they could. The only way they would go over it if it was for a big piece. And so now you're just stuck in this world where we're just going to make these scrap heap changes that don't cost us a lot of money, hope that something sticks. And if the team's in it, then maybe we'll go into the tax, but it would take a big move for that to happen. Mark Knapp, I see other teams able to make trades even this early in the year. Why can't the Braves trade for help as these other teams have done? Marlins just traded away a reliever with all-star credentials. I don't know that I saw that move, but you just don't normally see significant trades this time of the year. Also kind of talked about the other part of it is just they're not going to take on a lot of money right now, especially with where the team is. I know you just saw the Aaron Savali trade. That's something I wouldn't have minded doing to get some depth for the rotation. But you just don't normally see a lot of big moves this time of year. You can see some smaller moves, but what are you really doing? The Braves don't necessarily need any smaller moves. They need some big moves. They need a closer type reliever, or at least a 7th, 8th type inning type of reliever. They need a shortstop that can hit his weight. They need some help in those areas, and those moves just don't typically happen at this point of the season. We're going to go way over on today's podcast, but so be it. I'm going to get to all these questions. Next one from Hayden Harris says, if the Braves decide to be buyers, are there any short-term shortstop fixes that you would like for them to target? Someone you could get without giving up a whole lot to patch the offensive hole. I've been on the Josh Smith train. So here's the thing with trading for a shortstop to replace Nick Allen. And this was the same conversation we had last year about Orlando Arcia. You have to find somebody whose offense is to a high enough level above Nick Allen's offense to outweigh the detriment defensively, right? So for me, obviously, if you're an everyday listener, I know Hayden is, I value shortstop defense, above any other position on the field. And the Braves seem to agree with me on that. And so to go out and get another shortstop, they got to be a lot better offensively than Nick Allen is. And look, it doesn't take a lot, but it has to be much better offensively to give up what you would be giving up defensively, because I think that defense at the shortstop position is very, very important. And so, and we've also talked about this. We talked about it with Orlando Arcia in years past too. If the rest of the team is doing what they're supposed to do, you can deal with Nick Allen and his 60, 70 WRC plus batting ninth if he's giving you Gold Glove defense. The difference this year with Orlando is he wasn't giving you that Gold Glove defense, and it was a 60, 70 WRCS type of player. You can't have both of those things. But while Nick Allen's giving you Gold Glove defense, and if everybody else in the order is doing what they're supposed to do, you can live with it. Here is the thing, though. If you could find a shortstop that is a clear improvement offensively, and you could put Nick Allen on the bench to be a defensive replacement late in games, I think that makes some sense. So that's what, if I'm the Braves and you really need some help offensively, and you feel like getting somebody for the bottom of your lineup to replace Nick Allen is going to help this offense a ton, then yeah, go out and get a shortstop that is a definite upgrade. Again, it has to be a clear upgrade offensively, not just somebody that can hit 240 instead of 200, 220, whatever Nick Allen's at right now, but somebody that is a clear offensive upgrade but also use Nick Allen as a defensive replacement late in game. I think that could be an option for the Braves going forward. Matthew Carter, there's projections for us to draft another pitcher in the first round. We desperately need a shortstop. What needs to change for us to stop drafting so many pitchers? Well, in order for the Braves to stop targeting pitchers, one is that pitcher injuries would have to go away. I just think there is such a need to constantly be shuffling through arms and having a number of arms that are ready to go. You look at the system right now, and look, it's not great. If something were to happen to somebody in the rotation right now, you'd have to probably lean on a Davis Daniel or a Nathan Wiles to try to push things together. But you have arms on the way, like a Lucas Braun, a Didier Fuentes, maybe a Hurston Waldrop if he can figure it out, a Blake Burkhalter. You have arms that are coming, and if you don't draft those players, early on in drafts, you don't have that. It's also teams always need pitching, and the Braves do a great job of developing pitching to make these arms maybe look even better than they probably should be. And it makes them attractive in trades, and it allows the Braves to still be able to make some deals. So pitching is just at a point where you have to constantly be churning out good pitching, or you're going to fall behind. Really, look, think where the Braves would be right now without Spencer Schwellenbach, without Spencer Strider. I know he's struggling at the moment, but without, Bryce Elder. I mean, think where the Braves would be without those guys right now. And you just constantly have to be having pitching. So I don't think they're going to stop. And plus, it's hard to find the shortstop of the future at the back half of a draft. Shortstops of the future are getting drafted in the first 5-10 picks of a draft. I mean, that's always what teams are going to target. And so you're just not getting those at the back half of the draft. Any shortstop you're getting at the back half of the draft is going to have some sort of hole that you have to fix going forward. So, even like a Wahiwa Aloy from Arkansas, I don't believe he can stay at shortstop. And anybody that you think is going to be a true shortstop of the future, even Merrick Houston, who the Braves has been mocked to the Braves in a few mock drafts already. There are holes in his game. We don't know that he's going to be an everyday player. There are certainly questions about his game offensively. So any shortstop you're going to be getting at the back half of the draft, there are going to be question marks about that player. So I think that's why the Braves are going to continue. That's what they do well. They draft and develop pitching really well, and you always are going to need that. So until that changes, I think they're going to continue to go with pitchers. PJ's Braves. How long does Michael Harris have to figure it out at the plate? His plate discipline is not improving and seems to be even regressing. As long as he's playing Gold Glove defense, he's at least going to stay there throughout the remainder. I shouldn't say. I think there could come a point this year, if he stays as one of the worst hitters in baseball, that maybe they send him down while you have the option years to do it and try. If the Braves were to just completely fall out of this, and if that's the case, then I guess he's getting experience in a less stressful environment. But I feel like I just don't. What are the other options too? We've talked about that as well. What are the other options? Maybe a Carlos Rodriguez, who's maybe the best hitter at AAA right now, and he happens to be an outfielder. Not that that's saying much for being the best hitter at AAA right now. Eli White, we've talked about. I just don't think the options are great out there right now. And at least Michael Harris, similar situation to Nick Allen, is giving you Gold Glove defense. But how many Gold Glove players can you have batting, having OPSs under 600? How many of those can you afford to have in your lineup? Caden Hurd, who is your number one bullpen target if the season were to end and Marcel walks? How do you feel about a Kyle Schwarber as a replacement? Here's my thing on the DH spot going forward. I would almost rather just have a fluid DH spot. Now, look, if you can get Marcell Ozuna for $12 million, or you can get Kyle Schwarber for $15 million, whatever the case may be, yeah, they're two of the better bats in baseball. You got to make that deal. But I think it almost fits the team better, especially with the need to probably get Ronald off his feet frequently, and to get Drake Baldwin, if you're going to keep Drake Baldwin and Sean Murphy, to get their bats in the lineup. Even if you get rid of Sean Murphy, the days that Drake Baldwin doesn't catch, you can get him in the lineup as a DH. So I would almost rather have a fluid DH spot going forward. But if you're going to get great deals on those guys, then I think you obviously have to sign up for that. But I'm not opposed to having a fluid DH spot going forward. Mark Knapp, can't hires help keep Matt Olson's feet under control in the batter's box? I know Matt's not the biggest problem for our offense, but his feet are all over the place. Question, should we put Ozuna on the 10-day IL, bring up an emergency catcher, and get both Murphy and Baldwin at bats? Here's the problem with that right now is Drake Baldwin's in a bit of a cold streak. So And maybe part of that is just not getting, although he's been getting the bulk of the playing time here lately. But no, I think you want Ozuna's bat in the lineup to answer your question. I mean, I said this the other week when his hip issue was reported that maybe you go ahead and put him on the IL now while you had both catchers hitting well and you get both of them in the lineup. But now Baldwin has cooled off some. I don't think you can do that. And Ozuna seems to be holding together fine with the hip injury. Collis Ferguson, when does Alex Anthopoulos start to feel the heat? If you want to talk about shaking things up or organizational change, it starts and ends with him. He's responsible for drafting and signing the players in our low-rated minor league system. I take offense a little bit to the ending of that comment, the low-rated minor league system, when the Braves are constantly churning out rookie of the year candidates each and every year. Yeah, I get it. The system doesn't have a ton of depth, especially on the position player side of things, but they are constantly churning out very good pitching prospects. They are constantly churning out, rookie of the year candidates. You look at it before AJ Smith-Shawver got hurt, Drake Baldwin and AJ Smith-Shawver were number one on FanDuel's rookie of the year odds. So I take a little bit of offense to that last comment because I think they've done a good job of drafting and developing players despite constantly picking at the back half of the first round. I think this offseason is going to be big for Alex Anthopoulos, assuming that they allow him to spin and that the tax restrictions aren't there this offseason, assuming that there's going to be a big managerial change. This could be a big offseason for Alex Anthopoulos and his future here at the franchise. I think he will be here past this season. I don't think he's on the hot seat just yet. But again, also assuming that everything stays the way that it is right now throughout the rest of this season and they do falter, there's going to be a lot of shakeup in the offseason managerially, and I think on the player side too. And what that looks like going forward, I think is going to say a lot about Alex Anthopoulos' future here with the Braves. And it may be a situation where he doesn't want to be a part of that. Maybe Alex wants to step away. Maybe another team comes and snatches him up and he's done with what, he came here, he won a World Series. He put together a good run with the Atlanta Braves. Maybe he wants a new challenge out there. He's still young, still a good GM. Maybe he wants another challenge. That could be the case too, but I don't think it's going to be a situation where ownership says we got to get a new GM. I don't think they're putting this on Alex Anthopoulos, but I do think if he does stick around, what happens post this offseason, which I think could be a big offseason, is going to determine a lot about Alex Anthopoulos. Aaron Abston, what's your opinion on the left field situation? I think we'll be fine with Eli White in the limited time we have with Jurickson. So I do think Eli White, you put him out there every day until Profar returns. I think I've said this from the beginning. I think he just gives you more than Alex Verdugo does, and it gives you a veteran left-handed bat off the bench and Alex Verdugo. For games where Drake Baldwin starts, you want to get a left-handed bat off the bench. I think Verdugo can give you that. So I think Eli White needs to be out there every day. All right, we are way over time. My bosses are not going to be too happy with me on this one, but thank you so much for all the questions you submitted in. A lot of great questions. Thanks so much for sticking around with me in this one. We got David Thatcher, Laro Bond, Todd Twilley, Sylvia. Thank you all for joining me here on today's episode live. Hope you enjoyed this one. A lot of great questions to get to. Sports Stuff 24/7. Trade with the A's, Jacob Wilson, Lawrence Butler, and Mason Miller. That would be quite the haul. Yes, I would love to make that happen, but we're not playing MLB The Show here. That's probably not going to be the case. But thank you all for joining me. Make sure you hit that subscribe button, thumbs up button, leave me a comment down below. Make sure that you rate, review, and subscribe to the Locked On Braves podcast wherever you get your podcasts, and we will talk to you next.